Hello everyone, it's Ragewood and welcome back to another video. So if you haven't heard, Apple recently had an iPad event where they introduced updates to the iPad Pro, the iPad Air, and a new Apple Pencil that has some pretty cool features for artists. I personally was expecting an update to the iPad mini since it takes after the iPad Air so much, but unfortunately that didn't happen. Starting with the Apple Pencil Pro, which is what they're calling the new pencil, Apple basically took the Gen 2 Apple Pencil, added a couple of new features they called magical capabilities, and changed how it attaches to the iPads to charge because of the front-facing cameras, which we'll talk about in a moment. Basically making the Pencil Pro incompatible with all previous iPads except these new ones they just released. And the part that surprised me was that they kept the price the same as the Gen 2 Apple Pencil at $129 US or pounds in the UK. The new features they released though would be very useful, especially for artists that draw on the iPad with Procreate or other apps that are promised to receive updates. For example, in Procreate, you can now squeeze the barrel of the Pencil Pro to access the tool palette. And with the help of the haptic engine they added, you can now receive precise feedback from the pencil for specific actions. They also added a gyroscope to enable precise control of tools like brushes when you roll the barrel of the pencil, and it also keeps the hover to preview feature that is already in the Gen 2 Apple Pencil. Find My also finally debuted in the Pencil Pro, so it's easier to locate it, well, as long as it still has charge. Which brings me to one thing they didn't talk about: battery life on the Pencil Pro, and makes me wonder what it'll be like with all these new features added but the size remaining the same. And even with all these new features, the price remains the same, with a caveat of course, which is that it only works with the new iPads they just introduced. Next, let's talk about the iPad Air, which received some pretty minor but exaggerated updates. It now comes in 11 and 13-inch models, giving the 13-inch model 30% more screen real estate with no performance increase because people just love bigger screens, according to Apple. Let me save you some time here. The only real changes to the iPad Air are as follows: introduction of the M2 chip with a 10-core GPU instead of the 8 cores like on the M1 Air, Wi-Fi 6E instead of Wi-Fi 6, Apple Pencil Pro support instead of Gen 2 Apple Pencil, the storage capacity starting from 128 gigs to 1 terabyte instead of a measly 64 and 128 gigs, and the most ridiculous of all is that even though they changed the name to 11-inch iPad Air M2, the 11-inch iPad Air is actually 10.86 inches when you read the fine print, smaller than the 5th gen M1 iPad Air, which comes in at 10.9 inches. And weirdly enough, they talked a lot about it having liquid retina display, like the previous generation didn't also have liquid retina display. Oh, and they dropped the pink color and made the blue and purple a bit lighter. They also moved the camera to the landscape edge, which is apparently why the Apple Pencil Pro isn't compatible with previous iPads, as they had to rearrange the magnets and charging conductor that the pencil attaches to fit the front camera there. And even with all that, I still think the iPad Air is still the best value iPad to get right now because it starts at $599 compared to the Pros, which start at $999, an extra £400, where £400 can now get you a brand new 10th generation iPad, as they dropped the price of that to $349 US or pounds. When it comes to the iPad Pro though, there are much more significant upgrades, and some upgrades that no one really asked for, like the fact that it's the thinnest Apple product ever made at 5.1 millimeters for the 13-inch model. I don't think anyone had an issue with the iPad Pro being too thick. If anything, the iPad Air is supposed to be the thinnest and lightest iPad, but that's not the case here. In fact, this year, the new iPad Airs are heavier than the iPad Pros. The iPad Pros also come in the same 11 and 13-inch models and sports a brand new OLED display that they're calling Tandem OLED, because they say to achieve the high brightness displays that the Pros deserve, they had to put two OLED screens together, which achieved up to 1000 nits at full brightness and 1600 nits peak HDR brightness, which they called the Ultra Retina XDR. The 1TB and 2TB models of the iPad Pro also get the option of nano-textured glass like on the Pro Display XDR and the Studio displays. And the iPad Pro now comes in two colors, silver and space black. When it comes to performance on the iPad Pro, they skipped the M3 chip and went straight to the M4 2nd generation 3nm chip with a powerful GPU and an improved CPU with 4 performance cores and 6 efficiency cores, and up to 4 times faster than the M2 models according to Apple. It also has a faster and more efficient neural engine, and there was a lot of talk about AI, even though Apple barely ever talks about AI. The iPad Pros also have a new Magic Keyboard that doesn't work with any previous iPad, with an aluminum palm rest, function rows, and a larger glass trackpad with haptic feedback, just like on Mac. During the event, they also had a bit of talk about introducing more Pro apps on iPadOS as well. Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro on iPad received major updates as they introduced Final Cut Pro 2 and Logic Pro 2 in iPadOS. They also introduced the new Final Cut camera app for iPhones and iPads, but I guess most of the iPadOS updates will be announced at WWDC next month. A few other things they also did to the new iPads includes removing the wide-angle camera from the iPad Pro, so now both the iPad Pro and Air have one camera, which is the 12-megapixel camera, with the Air not having the LiDAR scanner and flash. And as mentioned earlier, the front-facing camera, along with the TrueDepth camera and Face ID on the Pro models, have been moved to the landscape edge. Well, that's about it with the updates announced at the recent iPad event. What do you think about the new iPad? Will you be getting one or upgrading from an older iPad? Let me know down in the comments. And leave an iPad mini in the comments if you watched all the way to the end, and I'll give you a thumbs up for reminding Apple they forgot about the iPad mini. And while you're down there, don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks a lot for watching, and until next time, cheers.
Have a great day.